I'm interested, Bishop, in your take on what the Bible says about this. What's fair and just from the scriptural point of view, or what can the church say? What say you about that? And given this conversation we're having about justice issues here in our country as we celebrate our 250th anniversary.
Well, I'm really on a hobby horse, if you will, a bandwagon, and we need to drive people back to a love that is equated by the acts of justice. The Apostle Paul said, "Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil, and hold fast." One translation said, "Hate what is evil, but cling to that which is good. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil." And I would add this, Brad, overcome evil and evildoers
Evil, yes.
with good.
Yeah.
So
Well, before you get too far away, do
I'm
you
a
happen to know the reference there, my friend?
yeah, it's that's, from Romans, the 12th chapter,
Romans 12.
verse 1 and verse 19.
Okay.
And you reach Romans 12, it's attributed, don't be overcome by evil. And in fact, that appears in the Bible more than once. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And
Yeah,
we see that message in the from the prophet Isaiah.
sure.
Who says the fast that I desire is that you care for the poor, that you care for that you care for the homeless, that you address concern for the widow.
Yeah,
That
if you
is
talk
the
about the basic things that Jesus says and what the Bible says, it's just, what is it? Care for the widow, care for the
Mhm,
orphans, care
mhm,
for the stranger. You know,
mhm,
that's pretty basic. And those themes are consistent. It is
mhm.
consistent throughout not only the New Testament and the Old Testament as well, but particularly in the teachings of Jesus. And it seems like, Bishop, do you see what you think? Those are just glossed over and overlooked or selectively, contextually not held up by many people who proclaim themselves as Christians. I don't get
Mhm,
it. I don't
mhm,
get it. And it is upsetting as people then leverage their supposed Christianity to serve an agenda that is anti homeless, that is anti-orphans, if you will, anti-widows, anti-strangers. They promote that agenda. It's not biblical, and it's certainly not of the church. Now, I'm sorry about my rant there, but I wanted to see what you think, as we have people who I believe are leveraging the words of Jesus and who are leveraging the uh, the word Christianity for their agenda.
Well, we believe God loves and is present with every person, even before they are aware of it. God seeks to make us whole and holy. That's that comes from our social principles of the United Methodist Church. I mean, and I'm really impacted not just by Matthew 25, but when Jesus says it, and recently Senator Warnock and Republican head of head of the House of Representatives, I guess, had a conversation. I don't know if it was a debate. Both of them are devout Christians. One's a clergy person, one's a lay person, but both are devout Christians, and they were looking at that. And one of the things Senator Warnock said, and we know this as preachers as well, is that Matthew text, Jesus said he makes reference to nations, and some people just look at that from the standpoint is, well, that means individual Christians are supposed to feed the hungry, and individual Christians are supposed to go visit the prisoners. Individual Christians are supposed to close the nation. But Jesus said that the nations
Nations.
shall be judged by this. So I'm one who argues the government should not do everything for all people, but Abraham Lincoln said the role of government should be to lift all artificial weights from its citizens. And so if people and it was a good thing when Social Security was started because it eradicated guaranteed poverty for lots of senior citizens.
Yeah,
People used to work, and when they got through working, then they joined in the ranks of those who were totally impoverished because there were a lot of places you didn't
yeah,
have a pension plan, or you had a very small pension plan and no post hospitalization plan
sure.
unless you can afford hospital. So then the socials. So people say, well, you can't vote. You don't want to vote for them. They're the communists. They're the socialists. So well, we have Social Security.
What
I,
a
if
bunch of
I
baloney.
guess that's socialism too. If
Yeah.
it's something that cares for all of
Well,
the people.
I think one of the things we have is we have
Yeah.
a basic non-understanding among many people about some of the basic terms. what is socialism? What is fascism? What is Nazism? What is communism? People don't get it. They are just throwing out terms like this to bash the other side. They don't even know what they're talking about. And so I think we as Christians need to, in my opinion, need to kind of reverse our situation a little bit and get back to some biblical understanding and biblical terminology and take everything through Jesus and through the teachings of the New Testament, and in order to do this. So I'm interested then in your take then and how a local church or a local clergy could respond to some of these issues that we're talking about here today. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we should respond with the answer that Jesus gave in terms of the greatest commandment is not only to love God, but also to love our neighbor. And
Yeah,
we need to have a much more gracious, and I would call it generous and expansive understanding of neighbor. Neighbor doesn't mean just a person of my same race or my
right,
same generation. We now we seem like we want to do everything, but that's a Generation Z. That's a generation. That's a millennial. That's a baby boomer. We find ways, Brad, to always cluster ourselves and cluster ourselves in such a way. When Jesus said the greatest of these things is to love one another. Blessed are those who will be peacemakers, for they will seek justice and be called children of God. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Who, who's supposed to do the feeding? Who's supposed to do the comforting? All of us are supposed to be doing that. And when Jesus says the greatest commandment, he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." And what I like about the story of the Good Samaritan was that translated into resources being
right,
shared,
right.
wounds being healed, and promises of support being made. So when we say we want to be a Matthew 25 church, I tell pastors and preachers that that there's no reason to skip around the judgment of the nations because all the nations will be gathered before, according to Jesus, and they will be separated from the sheep from the goats. And he said, then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you are blessed, and inherit and be the kingdom prepared for you. For I was hungry," and didn't say that you talked about food. It said, "I gave you food.
It
I
wasn't
was
just policy
thirsty,
talk,
and"
it was actually doing it.
that's
Action.
right, "I was
Yeah.
thirsty, and you did not pass a resolution at annual conference about clean water.
Uh,
You gave me something to drink.
right.
I was a stranger." This is the one we have the most problem with, Brad. We
Yes.
that
Oh,
if people could eradicate this,
oh my
we would.
goodness.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but there was something called the slave Bible. So when during slavery, the Bible that was used for both whites and for when slaves were able to be on the outsider, 95% of what's in the New Testament was not there.
Yeah.
So it was redacted. So the Bible that was used is called a slave, and there's still 2 copies of the slave Bible. One of them is at, I believe it's at Tennessee State University or Fisk University, but it's in Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
So, and the other one I think is in London, the slave Bible. But the reason I bring that up is because people they don't they don't they skip over that one. I was a stranger and you
Absolutely.
welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. And the righteous will answer, "Well, when did we do this, Lord? I gave to my church, uh, you know." And they said, "Whenever you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me." So our injury is not just to to our to our favorite caucus group. You know, Theologically, our injury is to Christ. We are injuring Christ every time we
Uh,
fail to demonstrate love that's tied with justice. The good news, I think, though, is that I've been reading, Brad, recently, just going back reading some things about the Constitution. All of this talk has got me interested in one of the books. It's a little book I got called "The Greatest Sentence Ever Written," and it's a powerful little book. Let's start with the beginning. It says, "We." The first word of the sentence is also the first word in our Constitution. Drafted 11 years later, which begins, "We the people." The phrase "we the people" is profound as it is simple. And then he goes on and goes on and gives a disclaimer, said, let's be honest about this. When they wrote this, they didn't mean everybody.
Yeah.
They didn't mean women. They didn't mean blacks. They didn't mean Native Americans. But they did. There was a sense of openness in the Declaration of Independence. I've been reading the last part of the Declaration of Independence, 1776, says the declaration that we sign, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Mm.
And before that sentence, this is at the very end of the Declaration, it says, with a firm reliance on divine providence. Now, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, Brad, does not say anything about Christianity or religion,
Right.
in spite of what people say. If
Now,
we go back and read it.
are you telling me, Bishop, that people actually read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and actually took it to heart, and maybe then also read the New Testament, especially the words of Jesus, there might be a different outlook on things. Is that what you're saying here, my friend?
Well, and what I'm saying is that those who are arguing that we're a Christian nation, it's not that's not in the Constitution. And if we want to be a Christian nation, as Gandhi said, then Christians ought to, I'm way taking license here,
Right.
but he said, I'm paraphrasing. He's not the only one who said this. He said, I might become a Christian if I saw people who actually were living their lives is the way they espouse to be Christian. So I say I'm less of I'm a less fan of us calling ourselves a Christian nation. I'm a bigger fan of Christians acting like we can love our neighbors in such a way
Yeah.
that we could have much more
Well,
influence.
this what we were talking about is a perfect example. People drawing things out of context. I mean, I'm gonna go off a slight tangent here. I'm a student of the Declaration of Independence era, especially Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, those fellows there, George Washington. And many those 3 particularly, but I visited, Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home, about a year ago. They were students of the Enlightenment age,
Mhm.
not necessarily of the biblical literalist age. They were about, what is it knowledge, what is being enlightened, and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and that informed them certainly as much, if not and not more than, any kind of a Christian bias. So, I just think we gotta be careful when we start to lift things out of context and apply them to our agendas, and I see a lot of that happening.
Well, again, Christianity and religion is not mentioned in the Constitution. Article 6 really, is the place that we often refer to, but it says, there will be no religious tests or required.
Right.
So there's no, there's protection for people to practice religion or not practice
Well, that's
religion.
right. That's right.
So we have freedom. That's where we do have freedom of religion, but not what I say. We don't have freedom to foster our religion on others. 62% of the country, according to the Pew Research, 62% of those in the United States of America uh, espouse to be follow Christians of
Right.
some with denominations and some with not any mainstream denomination. But the second largest group 25 to 27% who people some of them call the nuns. They have no religious affiliation whatsoever. A percentage of those people might call themselves atheists or agnostic, but a larger growing number of people um, have, don't have any a spouse.
Yep.
The good news is that people are still responding though to a gospel of love and grace, Brad. Let me say
Yep.
that again. People are still responding. I know this even I shouldn't say even in DC. I spent a lot of time living in DC as well as Indiana's home for us now. But I'm working with some young interns now who are from different places, some who are from DC, and I'm inspired because people are still responding to a gospel of love that couples itself with justice for our neighbors or justice for others.
Well,
There's
and
no reason whatsoever. for us to be having uh, uh, curable diseases continue to make a comeback in the United States, or people and children to be dying overseas that previously were not dying before we cut off international aid. Much of the international aid, let me say this too, Brad, was supported by U.S. farmers who were
Yes.
able to some of those extra produce or produce that we could what you call it export
Yeah.
as a part of international aid programs. So soybean and wheat and rice and these products that we are able to produce in abundance, corn, meal that we are able to produce in abundance. Some of that's being destroyed and wasted, and now the farmers have to be subsidized, or lots of farmers, family farmers in middle Midwest farmer states have been are filing bankruptcy because of tariffs and poor leadership. So going back to the reflecting pool, I said reflecting pool is a metaphor for the reflection of a lot of incompetence, and I also call just the demise of a compassionate approach to democracy.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do believe we have a firm reliance as the Declaration says, on the divine providence. God has said that the righteous shall not be forsaken. Psalm 11 says, if the foundation be destroyed, what shall the righteous do?" At the end of that psalm, it says, "God upholds the just."
Yeah. Well, let me
And
just
so
kind
we
of
should stay on the course.
I'd be reflecting on a couple things, and then I'd like you to kind of wrap us up with your thoughts about what's encouraging, as you always do. But I'm in alignment with your thinking that there's many people, including young people, who are spiritually oriented. They do think about God. They do think about ultimate things. They do think about how people are treated. They think about moral things, but they also have seen too much of the church not speaking to those things, and so they
Mhm.
have a sensibility that says, "Okay, I've seen that, I've done that, and I reject that," meaning the church. However, they are leaning into what you said about love and grace, and so there's a bit of a chasm between uh, what many people still espouse and
Mhm.
what the church is offering, especially as people become more and more aware of Christian nationalism. I just talked to a good friend of mine a couple days ago, and our conversation was about how he and his wife are leaving a one denomination and exploring another denomination because they were experiencing this Christian nationalism thing that was going on at the
Mm,
church they were attending, and they just couldn't take it any longer, especially because it was abusive to people in their life, their family, and that did this type.
mm.
So I just like you to speak about that in terms of what do you see as encouraging signs to kind of bridge that gap there? What are some encouraging things that you see as we celebrate? And I want to say we do celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. There's much more to celebrate than to be upset about. But what's your take on this as you bring us home about what is encouraging to Bishop Julius C. Trimble today?
Well, I happen to be United Methodist, and it's not a part I'm not part of a perfect church. We've been on both sides of history, the right side and the wrong side history. But I do believe that the moral of the arc of the universe bends towards justice, and it requires people who actually love God so much that we're willing to, with our own scars and our own stories to trudge on, not trudge on, but to struggle on for justice for all people. I believe that love is not just something that happens to people. Love is something that transforms societies and worlds and communities and homes. And I think it's imperative for us not to accept a government or a society, Brad, that somehow allows us to put people in categories of being lesser than.
Mm, yeah.
United Methodist Church shall confront and eliminate racism whether it's in organizations or individuals in every facet of life or society and at large. And racism and xenophobia which is, broadly defined as the fear of others,
Right.
that are different, is so pervasive that it's been used to convince people somehow that they're not loved enough.
Mm.
So I think we can really, if we can continue to not only, I believe in the possibility of a better, more perfect union,
Yes.
United States, and I declare that we are a multiracial, multicultural society. Just look at the music and look at the entertainment, look at the sports, and look at the FIFA that's taking place now that we're a major host of this world soccer. That millions of people. This is the more people are watching this than anything that has ever happened in the United States because it's globally being followed right now,
Sure.
the World Soccer Championship. So I'm an optimist, but I'm a Christian optimist in the sense that I believe that it requires us to be committed to prayer, but also committed to say, it's unacceptable for us to create spaces for people to let hate to fester.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
if I'm expecting Brad Miller to stand against the Patriot Front and the Christian nationalism, just like me as a person of color, stand against it because I love Brad Miller and I know that you love the same Jesus that I love. But
absolutely.
my expectations, I have high regard both not only for the words of the Constitution and for the promise of America, but for the people who, like myself, profess to be followers of Jesus. I by no means am I'm moving on towards perfection, if you will, like everybody else. Uh,
Sound like a
so
good
I'm
West
not,
End, a good West End there.
I haven't earned any trophies on how good of a Christian I've been, but I do believe that, you know, truth truth belongs to the people and that, I'll keep repeating what I heard, one of my colleagues from Indiana say some time ago that we cannot transform the world simply by going to church, but we can transform the world by being the church.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing here today. Love that final comment. We can transform the world not by going to church, but by being the church. And there's so much to say about that. Well, it's been a pleasure being with you and to celebrate this 250th anniversary birthday of our country as we unpack some of the difficult issues and some of the possibilities. And we always love to hear your insights. He is Bishop Julius C. Trimble, and this is the To Be and Do podcast. I'm your co host, Reverend Dr. Brad Miller. And we'll see you next time here on this podcast where we look to offer an encouraging word to an often discouraged world.